requests. Thanks to Orcon, the Golden Dawn, Tavern of Power and 95 BFM, and of course to all of you for being here. Before we start, I'd like to pay special tribute to my colleague Esther Macintyre, because this will be her last IRL. She's off to see the world, starting with Australia, so let's all make it nice for Esther. Coming up soon...
Thank you. It's good to be here.
She does the best 9 to noon program on radio in the country. You know, she's not boring. Not speaking about anyone in particular. Coming up soon, we have Ant Timpson talking about his appalling films that no decent person should see. Then Michelle Walsh from Augusto talking about how a creative agency winds up making cinema. And if you don't know what a creative agency is, we're going to find that out in that interview. And then it's Dylan Reeve and David Farrier Skyping in live from the United States of America. Talking about Tickled, which is one of the most remarkable film stories of any year. David was actually really sorry because he told us he could come, and then he got held hostage by the American film industry. But we have him. We have the Skype working. And then we'll bring everyone back for a final panel to talk about where moving pictures are heading in the broader sense. And this is also where we'll put some of your questions to the panellists. On the corner of the bar there is a box, and there are little pieces of paper, and there are felt pens. Thank you, Esther. And you can, at any point, pop over and write your question for any of the panellists.
We'll be doing a film focus for the panel as the film festival's coming up, but video's the future, so that's kind of the theme.
Yeah, exactly, because lots of interesting things are happening with video. We now have the trailer for Ant's new film, and I don't really think you should watch it, even though his children have seen it. So let's watch it.
Bad news. Oiker is dead.
Okay, so now I'm shit scared, Janet.
Hello.
I'm calling because I think it just might be possible my dad, Ronnie, is the Greasy Strangler.
You probably think I'm the Greasy Strangler.
I never said that.
Tell you a secret. I am the Greasy Strangler.
Hey, I call bullshit on that.
On your ass! I could feast on that queen's ass all night long.
Could you welcome to the stage, please, Mr. Ant Timpson? Are you happy with Ant sitting in the middle? Okay, Ant's on the end there.
Sorry for that.
Fussy camera people. And let's talk about The Greasy Strangler. This is an international film, a British director, New Zealand and American producers, set in LA. How does such a thing come together?
Well, obviously, like magic, you just saw. It was probably a film that wasn't going to be made any other way apart from a group of friends deciding, let's make this thing, because it doesn't really fall under the normal film financing options for this sort of project. It was a really difficult film to get anyone interested in. The script was so outrageous that when I got sent to it, I was like, there's no way in hell this is going to be made. And it had come from the UK through Ben Wheatley's producer. Ben Wheatley's a really great director from the UK. He's got a film in this year's festival called High Rise. And I worked with Ben on a film called ABCs of Death that he did a great segment for me. And so I got the script sent to me, and I was like, I love it. I've got to try and get this thing made. And I just ran into like roadblocks everywhere for obvious reasons. And then I thought of Elijah Wood, who I'd sort of met on the festival circuit, and he expressed to me that he had this company that he was sort of trying to develop a really sort of curatorial stable of directors with vision. And so I was like, yeah, okay, so maybe he's looking for like projects that no one else wants to make. And so I sent it to him, and within like 20 minutes he was texting back, lines from the films, saying, I'm in. And I was like, okay, so this is good. We've got Elijah Wood on. And from then, it was really just hitting people in various countries.
So did you know Frodo before that?
Yeah, I sort of met him through, it would have been when Lord of the Rings was shot originally, like the first one. And met him down in Wellington, and we got on really well. And he's, at heart, he's just a total film fanatic. And so he always has this, I guess, going through the rings thing, he's got a chip on his shoulder that he's been portrayed as, Frodo to the world over so many times that he, wanted to, cut loose a little bit. And that's why he was doing sort of films like Maniac and, kind of like what Daniel Radcliffe has been doing since Harry Potter, taking on really sort of provocative projects to separate themselves. So he was, once he came on board, it was sort of, a process of going to other sort of willing people saying Elijah's involved. We didn't really say he was just producing at that stage. It was like Elijah's involved. It was, oh, great, okay. And then later on, once you hooked them in, we sort of let, like, he wasn't starring in it, but he's involved with the project. And so it was, I went through Australia. We went to a company in Australia who I've worked with before called Madman. They were really good. I had a friend inside Madman. He said, this film's going to be a disaster, but we love you. We love the director. We want to back it. So it was kind of like a bunch of friends that are all in a certain position now where they are in their career that they can take risks, which is crazy because it's such a risk-adverse industry at the moment. Like everything that gets created has to sort of meet targets and demos and all these terrible algorithms. So to find a project that really meets none of those, like you can't even, people are like, how do you describe this film? It's, it's really even hard to pitch to people. So it was it's just an amalgamation of just a lot of people who really want to create something that doesn't really get made these days. Like films that we were inspired by in the 70s, like filmmakers like Jodorowsky and John Waters and people who just wanted to make, tell their vision without any sort of interference from outside financing. So yeah, it was a dream project that sort of like, we actually made the film without having all the financing in place. And then once we had something to show, we went to the British Film Institute and they said, oh, we love it. And which was the biggest surprise of all. Like when you look at the British Film Institute, the films they back each year, it was like, it was like a dream that they were going to be involved. So once they came on board, then we started getting a lot of sort of major festival interest. It was like, something that maybe people should check out.
Yeah. You've described it as a gross-out comedy, or I guess you could call it grosscore, as we've seen in the trailer, and it really does get to the bottom of people's disgust. And you have catered to a niche, I guess, over the years with Incredibly Strange, but it's still very risky when you're looking at something visually unappealing. How big is the audience for grosscore?
Well, we always hope that there was nowadays there's such a clutter that you have this sort of self-belief that if you create something for a niche, then that niche is going to be enough to sustain something that's done for a relatively low budget. But something like this, which is even beyond niche,
beyond the pale.
There's always a kind of risk. And I know that some of the people who got involved didn't tell other people they're involved with in business that they were backing the project until way down the line, including a friend who put his kids' money up, including my own family. Thanks to Rebecca for not kicking me out of the house. But
while The Guardian described it as an oasis of filth and depravity, 4 stars, which is awesome.
Thanks for mentioning stars, yeah.
Yes. Variety wasn't quite so impressed and suggested that it wouldn't get on many big screens. A, is that true? And B, does it matter?
Oh, well, fuck Variety. I mean, first of all, to get a bad Variety review for this type of film is like, that's just the big tick for us. Like we the minute we got a terrible review in Variety and Hollywood Reporter, we basically pulled all their quotes and made posters and at the Sundance Film Festival, and just went out to town with them. Because we went back and looked at the original reviews for Eraserhead, Pink Flamingos, El Topo, all those films that this kind of was inspired by, and the reviews kind of read like identical to the review we got. So it was like, it just felt like, yeah, we'd done the right thing. And then finally it sort of started getting out to people that got it, and they weren't sort of old stuffy guys from Hollywood. So, yeah.
Does it matter if it's not on that many big screens? I mean, there are other ways of making films work now, aren't there?
Well, I mean, what is on big screens these days? I mean, it's relatively. I mean, this is kind of like, you know, what they call VOD fare. I mean, films that find their audiences on digital channels now. You know, getting on the big screen is a sort of, you know, it's more the filmmaker driving an ego behind small films getting onto screens, whether it's contractual or, you know, just through their hard-earned effort of getting it, you know, just badgering someone to get it on screens. But ultimately, festival play, then they gauge, like, what are the numbers like? Is it worthwhile going out? So when you just have to look at the films that sort of reach screens these days. You know, films, especially in Australasia, genre stuff has never particularly done really well on screens. It's really dropped off from, you know, the heyday when I was going. You know, I used to manage a theatre in Balmoral called Charlie Gray's, and we used to play, you know, Santa Sangre for months on end, and, you know, that type of landscape has just eroded over the years. It just doesn't exist anymore. So to get onto screens, like, yeah, it's a great thing for filmmakers to see their work blown up, you know, but it's really about eyeballs on your work and how many people are going to see it. So for me, it's like, what's the end game? How are we going to get the film out to as many people as possible? And it's a bonus if it gets onto screens.
That's such a struggle now with the clutter of the digital landscape and video sharing. Video is the most, you know, snackable content, and we see it everywhere. Where do you think it's going to go?
Wow, okay.
I guess this is a panel discussion as well, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's probably a bit of a big question for
This
now.
is where we sort of talk about the Snapchat movie and things down the line. But
Yeah.
I mean, where will the
We'll talk
Greasy
about that
Strangler
later
go
on.
online?
Well, the Greasy Strangler is already, you know, selling around the world. So we sold to a US company, which is still really surprising that we got like a major sale there. And then in the UK, we hooked up with a really good company as well. So a lot of, you know, what I thought is, like, if I get these people involved in companies to use the advances as production costs, then they've basically bought in to the film's release anyway. So that was the idea, is like to get a few major territories buying in at an early stage, so we knew that it was going to get a decent enough release down the line. Because nothing's worse than getting everyone together, making something, and then it's like, this is what kills filmmakers, is like, this is the difference between making one film and making multiple films, is like, if you don't have that end game worked out, you're just going to be so soul destroyed about the distribution game. It's just going to, you know, kill you. So
Was it a hard film to cast? Because, I mean, you've got one guy who has studied at the Chekhov studio, who speaks 7 languages, including Mandarin, fluently. I mean, did you have to tell him it's not an Oscar movie?
yeah, and we only gave him like 3 lines as well. But
Yeah, you cast him as generic Senegalese tourist.
yeah, the casting process was really interesting. We had some really fun people come in to read. Like, it was a script that kind of did the rounds, and there were certain actors that are on kind of high-profile shows, like comedy shows, that really got it, loved it. The kind of people who Tim and Eric are idols to, like these actors. So we had people turning up there. I was like, holy shit, that guy got an Oscar nomination for something. And so, and then seeing them, you know, do the lines and everything, Jim was just like, it's not going to work because it's going to pull people out. He really wanted people that just felt completely alien to audiences, that didn't feel like they came from Earth. And so he spent a long time, like, the casting was nightmarish for everyone on the ground, because we really didn't lock casting until a week before shoot, which is not really the way you should do things. And it drove the casting agency through the wall, because they brought in hundreds and hundreds of people. And he went back literally to the first people that he himself called in, because he makes commercials and he uses really interesting faces, and for all his commercials that he shoots around the world, he's got a kind of Rolodex of people that he uses, and he kind of wanted like 1,000 of those sort of people to come in, but we kept getting like good actors in, and he really wanted people that felt, you know, the genesis of it is like, when we first talked about the script, he and I were like, it's kind of like steptoe and son. Like, that's the sort of basis of father and son, that have this really weird relationship, kind of isolated away from everyone else, and those crazy sort of discussions that happen behind closed doors. And so trying to find people like that, you know, once you have a face that you might recognise from another show or something, is just we felt was going to pull everyone away from the humour and oddity of it all. So it just, yeah, the casting was really, I wish I could name certain names that came in, but it was it was a fun process, but it was hair raising in terms of how close it got to derailing the whole project.
As much as I was saying this is a niche thing, it's harder and harder to shock people. You know, it's 2016. We've seen a lot of crap on the internet. Where do you think this kind of entertainment is important for the culture?
Well, yeah, right. I'm not even going to try to defend the subject matter, because for Jim and the writer, they weren't like, the whole idea of it was like, we're not going to try and write something to gross people out. It didn't come from that at all. It came from like, you know, what feels pure and right for these characters. It's like, yeah, these are guys that are going to wear like, you know, pink turtlenecks at home with underpants because they live in this room, this small house together. They don't have anyone else over. It's just like, it's very natural for them to be completely naked most of the time. So it was kind of a film that's like, it wasn't like we need a gross set piece here, we need something to shock the audience. It was like, what feels natural to the characters? Is there going to be humour that comes out of that scenario? And so that was kind of like, you know, the script was written by two guys trying to make each other laugh, you know, over long distance. And it was, you know, so there was a game of one-upmanship in terms of like, what could the characters do now and how could it play out?
I thought the IndieWire review was interesting because it said almost what you just said. It talked about the purity of expression in the film, that you don't see that much anymore. Is that what you were going for?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's it seems really crazy to, you know, overanalyze a film that when you look at the teaser was really just to make a lot of noise. Hopefully in the next trailer people sort of get the vibe of the film itself. But it's, yeah, it was really, I mean, to me, I think it's a really, really special film that, I know it seems crazy after you see that teaser, but it's, I feel it's a type of film that doesn't really get made anymore because there's no thought about pleasing, you know, anyone apart from the writer and director seeing their vision untouched. And we had fights with, this is where Elijah was really, really good because he's been on films since he's 5 years old and he knows the process from both sides. That we had, you know, there was a lot of producers on this film and we all were banging heads about stuff, and I thought it was just great at the end that Jim had final cut, which is for a low budget film is unheard of. It never happens because everyone they want to get in there and they want to fiddle it, they want to make it more audience friendly, and so that didn't happen. We just, you know, we gave notes about what we thought, but at the end we just, you know, worked with what Jim wanted and what his vision was going to be, and you know that just doesn't happen in feature films.
What got you started on this kind of film? Because you came in as, you know, as a fan, as a quite a young man. I mean, what got you started on this as a kid? By which I mean, where did the bad man touch you?
Where did the bad man touch me? In my heart. And no, so I don't know. I mean, I've always been, a film fan of all types of film, all types of cinema. Where it went off the rails, I guess, like as young kids, when I started getting into, you know, filmmaking itself, it was more like genre films because I was kind of, obsessed with like makeup and special effects, and so that was sort of like a how-to things. Like when you watch things, it's like, well, maybe we can go and make a really bad horror film with my brother, and so it was like that connection really cemented a lifelong love of, of just mucking in and getting in there, and that type of film. I really love that sort of guerrilla spirit that sort of exists through a lot of other things I do, like the 48 and so forth. So, yeah, but I mean, in terms of like, I guess it was having parents that really love films as well. We watched a lot of films, seminal films in my head. It probably didn't mean much to the rest of the family, but I can recall every single, major cinema moment. Like, as people remember, like those highlights, like they remember maybe when they saw Star Wars, but I remember like crazy, individual films where I saw it, what theatre it was, what happened during, like what I felt during the movie, and so.
Shall we talk quickly about the Incredibly Strange Festival?
Sure.
Which is happening as part of the New Zealand International Film Festival, as it does every year. Great lineup, including the Greasy Strangler. Is there a theme for this year's lineup?
No, I think this was, I've only got maybe 9 to 10 slots in the festival, so I've got to kind of be really vigilant in what plays, and I kind of think of like a nice variety, cross-section of sort of titles that I've seen on the circuit. So it's kind of, getting a few new voices in there, and then finding films of directors that I might have played previously, like a track record, sort of showcasing their progress, which is like, this year we've got Green Room, because I showed Jeremy Saunier, the director's film Blue Ruin before, and then Ben Wheatley, we played Kill List, Sightseers, and The Field in England. So we've had like a record of those guys, and then it was like, who else is on the circuit that's really making waves? And that was like the film at Sundance, Under the Shadow, which is an incredible Iranian UK thriller, supernatural thriller, and Swiss Army Man, which is that Daniel Radcliffe farting corpse movie, which is highly recommended.
You had me sold it. Daniel Radcliffe farting corpse.
I look forward to seeing this film and some of the others in the incredibly strange lineup. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Ant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ant. And we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 8 o'clock, and Richard, the DJ, will take over.
Ant Timpson, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Hello, welcome back to IRL The Pictures, looking at film with myself, Esther Macintyre, and Russell Brown. Thank you for joining us. In real life and online on 95bfm.com, the live stream is running, which is great. Thank you for joining us if you're at home.
Yeah, so if you haven't gotten on your socials and told people to go to 95BFM, because it is working after all, if you could do that, that would be awesome.
Put it on Facebook.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Facebook, Instagram, etc., etc., or nothing.
Did anyone Snapchat it?
Has anyone found a Pokemon in the
there
Golden
is a
Dawn
hashtag.
courtyard? That's what we really need to know.
All right, that's a good point. There is a hashtag Orcon IRL.
There you go. And you can also post questions using that hashtag on Twitter. We may find them. Or post them in real life down the back of the courtyard, just at the bar here. We've got a cardboard box which you can post questions into, pens and paper provided, looking at film. So our next guest for this evening is from our creative agency, Augusto, who make creative content for clients and businesses. They're also behind a new documentary on ex-All Black captain Richie McCaw, which has just had a trailer released. It comes out in cinemas nationwide on September the 1st, with a soundtrack from Lord. It's sure to be emotive and explosive, as the press release states. We can't talk much about the film itself, which is okay. We are quite interested in the agency that's actually behind it, and Michelle Walsh, the co-founder of Augusto and director of Chasing Great, this new documentary, joins us this evening. Michelle, come on up. Thank you for being here. Welcome. Great.
Right, should we watch the trailer just to
Yes,
see what
good
this
start.
is about?
It's
Because
going
it's
to be a little
quite
different to the
swish.
Greasy Strangler. You'd hope.
If you're going to be a good captain, then you've got a hell of a lot to learn. Being able to perform when it really, really counts, that's the bit that became a big challenge for me.
Welcome to your life.
He's almost like an explorer in a way. He wants to take the team to places that no one else has been before. He's an ordinary man, but he was doing something extraordinary.
First time I really understood who the All Blacks were was the '87 World Cup.
I can still visualise him on the floor, his eyes glued to the TV.
When he first arrived, he was not the most talented athlete, but what he did have was a massive desire.
You want to be an All Black? Let's write down a plan, mate.
You don't just want to be an All Black, you want to be a great All Black. I was like, what? I just wrote GAB at the bottom.
Everybody wants to rule the world. There's a room where the light won't find you. Holding hands while the walls come tumbling down. Everybody wants to rule the world.
It's exciting. I just want to get there. I just want to bring it on.
There we go. So, yeah. Well done. It looks like it's going to be amazing. So there's a premiere screening in August. So we can't say a lot about the film itself, but it's interesting.
Making it.
You're still making it now, yeah.
Yeah, we're in the last few weeks of finishing it, so we're really close. It's very exciting.
Michelle, I wondered if you could start off by actually explaining to us here what a creative agency does, because I think a lot of people have heard of them and don't know exactly what they're for.
I think that it's a really, it's an interesting question for us because we've always had a lot of trouble defining ourselves. We started about 8 years ago in a back bedroom with my partner, actually, Leon, and we, at the time, content and video production, people were making either corporate videos, which were really dull, or they were making TVCs or film, and there wasn't really much going on in the content space. And at that stage, I'd been working with Touchdown, so I had a broadcast background. Leon had been at October, which was a digital background. And we really took a punt and said there's going to be a lot more video online, which was a lucky punt. It turned out to be the case. So from that, we really came from a production background, interestingly. And so the people that we collected were these incredibly talented people who had come from long-form television making or documentary making and were really interested in what that looked like when you brought it into a commercial sense, commercial space, content space, and lifted the production values. So from there, really, we just kept collecting these amazing people, and we had great relationships with clients, and they'd ask us to extend our offering, if you like. So the scope grew, and then with that, sort of the demand for the strategic thinking, planning, and sort of grew bigger and bigger. And now I think the best description really is that we're a whole collaborative of thinkers and makers, and we're all in the same building. And what we make really differs. So you see one part of the business we have is doing really high volume, low cost content, which is Corner Store, right through to, a feature film and everything in between, where we the global sponsorship agency for the All Blacks for AIG, and a whole bunch in between that. So it's a really interesting space, and I think you probably understand why we struggle to define ourselves. But we're really a production company that tacked on these more agency functions, whereas you see in a lot of other out in the industry, you're seeing sort of agencies picking up production function to meet the insatiable need for content. So I think we've just come from it from another direction, and it's made for a really interesting group of people and some really fabulous work.
You have had that long relationship with the All Blacks brand as well. Is that your biggest brand relationship with them? Because
yeah, there's no doubt we do a lot of rugby, and that's been really exciting. And from that, we've spawned off into a lot of other sport. The All Blacks relationship started in. It's funny. We got asked to do a small video for Adidas at the time, and I remember their agency didn't really know what to do with a low budget piece at the time, and we were like, well, we'll try that. And that was 5 years ago, and from there we did a documentary for Adidas, which was our first branded long-form content piece called The Making of Black, and that ended up being distributed by IMG, so around the 2011 World Cup. And sort of from there, obviously, we built a lot of trust within that network and with the Olympic Committee and the like, and then, the long 5 years later, we made a big documentary, which is non-commercial. Interesting.
Right, I was just about to ask you about that. So this is non-commercial. It stands apart from your commercial work. There's nothing like any product placement or anything.
No, not at all. No, it's very much made for the film. It's film commission. It's a film commission project, and our clients, if you like, are the New Zealand public, and there's a lot of them, a lot of people that have a lot of expectations for this. So it's a different, very different. There's not a client attached, but every project we go into, you're thinking, who's the audience all the time? Who's the audience, whether it's for a brand or whether it is for a non-commercial entity like the Filmcom. So we approach that in the same way. It's just we were lucky that we have 40-odd people in the company who can work across all these different iterations of content and brought their skills together to create Chasing Great. And We initially, like with a lot of documentary, you just need to kind of start. There's a story unfolding. So in this instance, we just started making it, and it required the whole team, all of Augusto, from the from the agency function, right through design, motion graphics. The whole team came on board to help start making it before we even had a platform, a distributor. We had no funding. So I think that's really interesting, and I think with Doco, you see it with Tickled, they crowdsourced the start of that, and I think we really need to be inventive with how we begin the documentary process. And luckily, cameras are cheap now, and you can often find a student who'll give you a hand. So.
A couple of years ago, I actually recorded some videos for an Orcon-sponsored thing with you, and I was quite fascinated by the tricks and techniques that were there to make a really basic shoot. There was a director and a soundy cameraman look really swish, and you had a lot of moving camera stuff.
Yeah.
And I get the impression from the trailer that some of that stuff's transferred into the film.
Yeah, I guess so. I think we've always aimed for high production values, and now with drones and steady cams and rigs and movies and all sorts of things to make things look fantastic. And I think you can see young kids coming out of film school producing some beautiful work. I think that's a great thing. Story will always be king, and also getting great performance out of people and building rapport and connection with people will sort of trump production values. But together they make for beautiful things that people want to watch.
And you're the director of this, Michelle.
I'm a co-director. I do have another great director I've been working with, Justin Pemberton, who is a superstar.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky in that respect. Plus, we also have Augusto to run, so it was nice to have a hand.
It's an interesting time for an agency like Augusto to be doing a feature film. Had you been thinking about it for a while, or leading up to this?
That's a good question. I think in 2011 we did our first documentary, which was actually with David Farrier, called God Defend New Zealand. I think it got buried at about 11 p.m, so nobody saw it. But we were always really interested in this long-form space, and I think the wonderful thing about doing commercial content is it allows you to retain really incredible people who can move across into areas where there isn't necessarily the funding to make things, and so you get the benefit of having an authenticity story to your clients. So when you talk about storytelling, you can authentically say we tell stories for people that choose to watch them. And it also, I think, for the staff and for the culture, it's a great thing to be able to work on projects that are heart projects, passion projects. So even with Chasing Great, it's interesting. We didn't immediately say this is going to be a film. It was a story that we were really, really interested in telling. It was a wonderful privilege to have access into that world, so it was a no-brainer to do it. And we were able to bring in the team around us to do that. And I think it's just really testament to a phenomenal group of people who are passionate about storytelling, whether that be for a brand or
I'm interested, your cinematographer was Jacob Bryant, who I'm quite familiar with, but I'm familiar with him as someone who does gnarly, hard-nosed documentaries in places like Afghanistan. It's kind of an interesting choice.
I think maybe it comes from television background. I used to make programs, right from in the old days, I think, changing rooms to making. I know. I used to make the zoo program when my kids were really little and go around the world filming orangutans in crazy places. But we always had it was usually me and Soundy, if we were lucky, and a cameraman, and we would kind of traipse through the jungle, and you'd be the researcher and the producer, and you'd just do everything. And so what I loved about Jake, and I love about documentary format and storytelling and content, is that you can be a really nimble crew, and you rely on your team to have a good eye, to make good decisions. With a documentary, you can't be telling a cameraman in a moment, a really important moment, to reframe or try another angle. You've got to trust their eye and their judgment, and Jake is just phenomenal at that. So it was a real gift to have him in that environment. And I think, a character study on an extraordinary individual is always going to be interesting, even to people who like to be in war zones.
Yeah, on this project, no one was going to shoot at him.
Do you think this is a wider trend that we're going to see more of in terms of productions being done in under one roof?
I think, you know, platforms are becoming so vast and so broad that even within, let's take film out of the equation, if you're making a piece of content for a brand, you've got to think about, well, is one of their audiences in Snapchat, Vine, Facebook, YouTube, Netflix? So to that, in that respect, yeah, you've really got to consider all of your audiences and where they are, and what they need. So yes, whether people will do film as well as we do a lot of 360, and we have a huge emphasis on innovation and technology. It takes a really interesting group of people who want to be disruptive and innovative, and we don't have a blueprint to work from, so you can imagine that's been difficult at times. You can't look at another company and go, well, they do it like this, because our whole industry is changing, and in a year and a half we're going to have to work in a different way. So you need people around you that are really happy to go, well, we don't know how to do it, but let's give it a go. So if you get those collections of people who are really excited and enthusiastic about the future and all the different opportunities that are going to come up, who knows, we'll be making a boot launch in Pokemon Go soon for Adidas. I mean, I don't know. Pokemon going to wear boots. It's exciting. It's daunting, but it's exciting. So you definitely need people with that spirit around you. And yes, then perhaps, yeah.
What was the role of the Film Commission in it?
A funder.
So you got some money from the Film
Absolutely,
Commission.
yeah. No, they've been amazing. We've had an incredible amount of support. We've been very, very lucky. Obviously, the subject matter is of interest to a lot of people, being Richie. So we've been very supported. It's been a long process. We've been making it for quite a few years. So yeah, no, they've been amazing.
Music, the soundtrack as well as the Lord song, SJD.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of fascinated by the way that New Zealand feature films now are coming out with soundtracks by people that we can go down to a venue and watch play, and people who are great. I mean,
Exactly.
How did you pick him?
I actually can't take credit for that. That was Justin Pemberton, who has a brilliant ear for music. I think he's done an extraordinary job. But as soon as he suggested Sean, I was like, and he started getting some early indications of the sort of music we wanted to have in it. I was stoked. So, no, I unfortunately can't take any credit for that. But he's great. We're very lucky.
The All Blacks relationship, were there any conditions put on your access?
No, but interestingly, when you have built trust up like that, you almost self-regulate. You don't need them because you're aware of how privileged you are to have those kind of relationships. So, no, they weren't at all. Actually, we were very, very lucky. But we've worked for 5 years with the All Blacks, and we've done a huge range of content for them in all sorts of, from the doco as well. So for the Adidas one, which we did a while back. And so you treat that access with the privilege and care that it deserves. Yeah.
I was just going to say, in terms of the technology, some of this stuff is pretty expensive. Drones we're seeing a lot more of. I don't know if we're going to reach drone saturation at any point, but how much of a concern is that? Growing technologies, changes, and forward planning and budgeting and things.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think I'm really pleased that drones are the way they are now, because when we first looked at drone technology, Leon bought these enormous helicopters, which honestly would have decapitated anybody. We saw one hit a van and it basically pulled its door off once. And so I'm personally thrilled that there are less expensive devices like that we can have access to. Are we going to get drone saturation? I don't know. I feel like we see a drone shot in every video now. But again, right time, if you use it in the right way and it enhances the story, and you're able to bring that production value to your production, well, that's fantastic. But again, it comes down to story. So you can have the most beautiful shots in the world, but it doesn't mean people are going to necessarily get really excited and share it. So.
And just finally for now, because we're going to get you back to talk about platforms, because that's really interesting. You're talking about story. This is a documentary. Can you see the day when you will make a drama or a comedy?
We actually made Short Poppies with Rhys Darby, which is for TVNZ and Netflix. So we've done a comedy series, which I enjoyed. But I was talking to Esther before about there is personally, as a director, there is nothing for me better than connecting with somebody and to the point where they'll talk to you in a depth that maybe you haven't heard from before, or that there's a comfort and a trust level there where they'll allow themselves to open themselves up. That I get a huge thrill out of that. That's really satisfying as a director. So never say never. I think in Augusta we probably will. Whether I do it, I'm not sure.
Oh, thank you, Michelle Walsh, and you will be back later on, and I really want to talk about a few things with you. So please thank Michelle.
Thanks so much.
And we'll be back in a few minutes with Dylan Reeve and David Farrier live from America.
Post your questions in the box at the bar.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. Hello, we're back.
So just a short break this time so that we can get you home on time.
And because we had the delay with the streaming, we're going to go straight from talking to our next guest, Dylan Reeve, into the panel we've been talking about, and that should be quite fun. But first, Esther,
So
would you like to introduce proceedings?
I would. Now, the Tickled journey started when light entertainment journalist David Farrier stumbled across a Facebook post from Jane O'Brien Media advertising a call out for young athletic males to audition for competitive endurance tickling league. In the US, they were offered $1,000 cash each, flown to LA, all expenses paid, to be filmed being tickled. And the response they got back was bizarre. It fueled a journey into this weird world overseas. And, I guess the trailer will tell you more, but we'll be speaking with Dylan about the journey and where they're at now and where it's going to go. Cue trailer.
It's coming.
I can't say I've ever interviewed anyone that looks like you before.
Really?
I've made a career out of looking at the weird and bizarre side of life.
It's quite a kick.
So when I discovered a strange video online, I knew I'd found my next story.
CET, Competitive Endurance Tickling Group we got here.
Competitive endurance tickling. It was one of the strangest sports I'd seen. So I told Jane O'Brien Media I'd like to do an interview. Instead of getting a yes or no, I got this.
Association with a homosexual journalist is not something we will embrace. Shame on you. Little gay Kiwis. Regards, Jane O'Brien Media.
It was hard to take the insults seriously, considering the sport did seem slightly gay. This tickling wormhole was getting deeper.
I mean, obviously it's just for fun.
Is it just for fun? It's tickling.
I was young at the time, didn't think nothing of it. And I was like, $2,000, that's gonna be cool.
I mean, imagine being a teenage boy. She would just keep sending them whatever they wanted.
She offered my one buddy a Chevy Cruze and $30,000. The money's endless.
This tickling empire is way bigger than we ever imagined.
They have tickle cells all over the U.S. They're everywhere.
And at some point, these boys say, I'm done. The thing that she hates the most was no. It was like a bomb went off.
Your phone number and your personal information are entirely known and subject to publication on the internet.
All hell broke loose.
All of a sudden, these videos are on YouTube, Vimeo, and every other site you could imagine.
Sending emails to the high school that I coach at.
What do you think your mother's gonna think about this?
We're shooting a documentary.
I understand what you think you're doing.
If you want to stick your head in the blast first, do it.
Jane O'Brien's a ghost.
Okay, let's go. I'm breathing heavily.
Yeah, Sam. We could hear laughter coming out of the vents.
We've been spotted.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And while we welcome Dylan Reeve, the co-director of the film, up to the stage, his fellow co-director, David Farrier, is in fact watching us. He's watching this stream. So if everyone could say, hello, David.
Hi, David.
Hey, Dave.
David says he's naked.
Hello. So I hope he doesn't Skype in.
Which is...
Oh, shit, is he there?
Hey!
David, tilt down. Down. Point the thing down. Oh no. Come on.
No, you don't need to see that.
You got pants on? There's a very good chance he doesn't have pants on.
This is your relationship, isn't it?
Thank you both for joining us. Hi, David.
Yeah.
Can't see
Well,
you, David.
I actually wasn't expecting to have David here so soon, so this is great. I'm going to put this question to both of you in that case. I put it to you that A, your film has succeeded already beyond what you could have dreamed, and B, you never imagined your life could have gotten this weird. Would that be a fair summary?
So the film has definitely exceeded our expectations by the fact that we're talking about it, that it's been played on cinema screens in New Zealand, let alone dozens around the world now. That is way, way beyond what we expected. And I certainly didn't expect to be talking about tickling every day of my life.
Whereas, David, I guess you were kind of acclimatised to weirdness, though? No, he's not hearing us.
No, I've always been acclimatist, but I think the scale of weirdness in this particular case was larger and, I guess, more expansive than we encountered. It was this weird experience of, since we made the film, it's not like we made it and then it stopped. The weirdness has just kept on going, the kind of fascinating aspect to it.
Thank you, Scott. Dylan, I talked
He's
to...
had a few drinks.
I talked to Dave Gibson at the Film Commission when I ran into him, and he told me two interesting things about getting Tickled made. One was that one of his board members came away from the screening and said, well, that was great, but it's not real, is it? Are there still a lot of people out there who think it's a mockumentary?
Yeah, and I don't think we anticipated that. So I think the word he used when he described that counter to me was he said that she thought she was being forgotten silvered again. It's not that, but just today, like the trailer for the film was on the top of the documentaries subreddit on Reddit today, and so Redditors being cynical assholes for the most part. I mean, I'm one. There was a lot of people in there going, "It's fake. It's not real. It's clearly fake. You idiots!" And I find that hilarious because, I mean, if you saw actually, some guy even today tweeted, "I saw the film, but I still don't think it's real." I'm like, really? Like, if you do even a few minutes worth of research, I think you can find it's real. But I mean, it is absolutely a case of the truth is stranger than fiction.
And the other thing that David Gibson said that he had to sell to his board was that a very substantial part of this film's budget was defamation insurance. But if you've seen the film, I think people will understand that that's part and parcel of this film. It could not have been made without it, could it?
So there's a thing called E&O insurance in film production, and Ant could probably actually explain it better than I can, but essentially it's insurance against being sued. So usually when you make a film, it's like, so someone doesn't come along later on and say you ripped off their story, or if you're making a documentary, it's so someone doesn't come along and say you lied to them about how it was going to be used or something like that. When you make a film about someone who doesn't want a film made about them, that becomes much more complex. And so E&O insurance was a huge problem for us, and yeah, it has made up a substantial portion of the budget. And so we have to be insured against being sued.
It must have been incredibly stressful getting threatened with being sued. And there's a point in the documentary where it seems you can go no further. You're really trying to find this one character. I hope you've seen the film, but...
Let's not be too spoilery, Esther.
No, yeah, you'll get more out of it if you've seen it for sure. But was there a point where you wanted to give up?
There were points at different stages where it was a challenge to continue. So right early on, we suddenly got a barrage of legal threats. We got David had a private investigator turn up at his doorstep, telling him that it was a bad idea to make the film. We had letters from lawyers in Auckland and in New York and I think California as well, all saying that if we carried on discussing this matter or trying to make a film, that we were going to face defamation lawsuits in 2 countries or more, who knows. So that was challenging. And then once we got past that, this E&O insurance thing was a problem. We knew we'd have to have E&O insurance, and the more legal threats you get, the harder it's going to get that insurance when you need it. And so there was a point in the film where we're at this kind of stage where we really need to be careful about how we proceed, and that we don't want to make it worse for ourselves, and that was a real challenge that we
And
faced.
you've got a family. Did that play in your mind?
No.
It must have.
Yes. No, it did.
yes.
It did, but I think I had a sense of, my wife's at the back laughing at me. Thankfully, she was along for the ride. Like, she was seeing all the emails I was receiving and all the crazy stuff, and was helping us figure things out. So she was involved, and I think if she'd at any point said, "You need to stop this now," I probably would have listened. But there was also the thing that there was a sense of disconnection. Like, we were far enough away that it seemed like whatever could happen was very abstract. I wasn't too worried about it actually really messing up my life. But who knows? I may be wrong. Some people would like me to believe I am wrong.
I was scared for you. I bit all 10 of my nails off watching the film in the cinema. It was a stressful
Sorry.
watch, but well done. And so where do you stand legally at the moment? Can you update us on the current state?
We are not currently facing any lawsuits in a court of law. So we got sued. David, yay! This may not remain the case. We got sued. David was in Missouri for a festival called True False, and a woman came up behind him and said, "Are you David Farrier?" And he turned around thinking she was a fan, because that's how he rolls. And she said, "You're served," and handed him what turned out to be 2 lawsuits. One filed in Utah and one filed in Missouri, because we'd screened the film in those 2 states. And so they were both defamation lawsuits, claiming all manner of things. And essentially those have been dismissed because they were filed in what's called improper venue. There was no real reason to sue us in Missouri or Utah. So that lawsuit can absolutely still be refiled. It was dismissed without prejudice. So they can refile it in a more appropriate venue, and then we'll have to deal with it. But that's what that is.
There was another really unusual, and I cannot think of a precedent, and stressful thing that happened to you, which was the LA Q&A after the film. I mean, you guys have been amazing with Q&As after the film, but you were on your own in this case. David had abandoned you for some glamorous thing or something.
David was doing the screenings in New York, and I was doing LA. We split up so we could cover 2 coasts.
No, I was just trying to...
Very handy. Yeah, he had abandoned me. He was probably in bed at that point.
Totally, yeah. Perhaps we could watch a little bit of that, and David, we'll bring you back in to talk about it as well, but... can we have a look at that?
If, when you stood there in Muskegon and he told you death threats were made, why did you not immediately go to the police and report them if you thought people were in danger?
Did Jordan tell you when he had that conversation with us?
Why did you, when you were in Muskegon with Jordan, why did you not go and report death threats to the police?
Did Jordan tell you when he had that conversation with us? Did he tell you?
Listen, they sent police dogs and bomb-sniffing dogs and police after me because of those threats.
No.
Those are incredible.
That is not what happened. What happened is, at Sundance, you turned up in a screening.
Yes.
You alarmed people around you. Now,
No.
I'm not saying...
It's my favorite. I know it's difficult for you, but what I did was I told the people sitting around me that I was going to take notes because I was in it, and that's it.
People around you were alarmed. They informed ushers.
Before
Ushers called Sundance Security.
Why are you so
Sundance Security.
Why do you think you could just lie for the heck of it?
That was fun, and that went on for 45 minutes.
Yeah. And if you didn't see it, I should emphasise that wasn't just on video. That was a Facebook Live video. And it was live. And I happened to just walk in on it, and I could not believe what I was seeing.
So-
And your lovely wife Mel tweeted, when my husband is finished being threatened by these awful people, could someone who's there ask him to get in touch? How was that? I mean, were you aware that it was going live, and how did you deal with it?
So that guy you saw, his name is Kevin Clark. He's a producer for Jane O'Brien Media, who's the company that we were ultimately exposing. And he turned up there, and not just him, but he was there with like a dozen people, and including, if you watch the film...
Including Jabba the Hutt.
Well, including ultimately the subject of the film, the person we uncover as... I would not say that, allegedly. The person we uncover as the person behind everything. And so they all came to LA, and bearing in mind Kevin and the other guy live in New York, so they flew to LA to come to my Q&A, and I don't know what the end game they imagined was, but that was what happened.
Surely they could have gone to the New York Q&A.
I would have thought so. It would have been easier.
Yeah.
But normally when I do a Q&A for these films, I've seen them a few times. I've seen it a few times before, so I usually just turn up like 10 minutes before the end of the film, just check the place out and then go in and do the Q&A. But for that one, I was in LA and I had no car and I was just kind of bored, so I went to the cinema early and actually watched people going in and talked to people who come out of the previous session. And I saw them arrive. And so I had an hour and a half that I knew they were in the film. I had an hour and a half to kind of try and figure out what to do. And one of the things we did was we were like, well, let's live stream it on Facebook then. And so that was what, but even that, like that, the thing started before I thought it would, because Kevin came out of the cinema 10 minutes before the end of the film and encountered me in the foyer. And so the whole thing starts really abruptly with us having this argument, basically the same argument. It carried on in the foyer. And it was the most insane thing. Like, just, we'd never have imagined in a million years that it could happen. And it doesn't make sense, at least to me, for them to do that, for that to be
It
there.
was a really weird point as well about death threats. It seemed irrelevant.
Well, so he runs a website. If you really got lots of time and you feel like it, he runs a website called tickledmovie.info. So we're tickledmovie.com. He runs a website called tickledmovie.info, which is a truther site, essentially, if you're familiar with that term. He basically posts on there about all the supposedly unethical and occasionally potentially illegal things that we did. And so his point there is that he turned up at a Sundance screening, and Sundance, the Sundance security called the police, and so the police, they didn't do anything, but there were police and some police dogs at the cinema at the end of the film. And so David posted a photo of that on Twitter, and he seems to suggest that we called the police and told them that there was a threat to the cinema and that they should bring bomb-sniffing dogs, which was absolutely not what happened. It's just Sundance had a policy about how they approach things, and that was their response. But that's like that's a big bullet point in his list of things that we did.
Perhaps we could bring David in now. David, you were in New York. Were you watching all this, and were you worried about your gay husband?
Yeah, I was with about 6 friends on the side of the street in New York, just mostly annoyed that I wasn't there because, we split. I was just annoyed I wasn't there, but no, I was just amazed at how Dylan handled it. I mean, a Q&A is quite full on in itself, but then when you've got, main subjects of the film, more than 3 actually, but there were 2 that you saw, when they were all sort of taking you on. I mean, the character from the film right at the end of the mic, and he basically just used that time to say that this isn't over and that it's just going to carry on.
I think we're going to have to...
He knew he needed a better lawyer. So we'll I mean, he's already suing someone else in the film.
How is
so,
Skype
I mean, they've got the money. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
It's been eventful.
Okay, the Skype at this end's almost comical.
What happened to Kim.com's mega chat thing? Where'd that go?
Exactly. The gay thing there, Dylan, of course, was a joke on the fact that people have to keep putting in their write-ups on the film that you are straight.
Parenthetically heterosexual, I call myself now. Yeah, the Guardian's done that, and Variety has done that.
Brackets straight.
Yeah. But what David was saying there is at the end, I gave the guy at the end, I said, we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to give you the microphone, and you can say whatever you want. He didn't need the microphone. He has a good speaking voice. And he basically said that you've got your lawyer's the wrong sort of lawyer. You've got an entertainment lawyer, and what you need is a criminal lawyer, because you'll be facing criminal charges in New Zealand and the US, and we'll take you up. You'll be in front of the Queen's Bench for indictable offences, which doesn't exist. So it was a very bizarre, continual sort of veiled legal threat. Just again.
Well, one thing he did say, is it Steve?
Steve, Kevin?
Yes, Kevin. Sorry, Steve. One thing Kevin said was that you were unethical in your recording of people when you had assured them they were not being recorded. And that does happen in the film. How do you sit on that?
We think we didn't assure anyone they weren't being recorded. We told them we wouldn't film the meeting with them, and we didn't. But even so, like even if that were the case, and I don't think it was the case, but even if it were, like, if the subject of a documentary can dictate the terms of the documentary, then it kind of defeats the purpose. So we did what we thought was fair and necessary and legal to tell the story we had to tell. And I don't think we've been unreasonable.
No, I think you've been very moral. It's a very moral film. We're going to roll straight into the panel in a moment, but I guess the last question is this story done, or are you going to tell more of it?
We're still living it, so if we find the right opportunity, the right way to tell more of it, then we may do. It's just a question of how and where and when, and what the story ends up being. But we're still, I get daily emails from people who've had strange experiences with Jane O'Brien Media or other people involved in the film, and we keep finding new things, and obviously the lawsuit threats have carried on. So, in some sense, the story certainly isn't finished.
Right. Well, I think you and David are due a big round of applause. We're going to roll straight in. So if we could have Ant and Michelle and what's your name?
And just remember, Tickled is screening as part of the New Zealand International Film Festival.
Is it?
Cool.
No,
I don't think so. But it's still playing at the...
I thought it was.
No, it's still playing at the Academy in the Rialto, though.
That's embarrassing.
Maybe.
Yes.
Go and see it.
So let's get the stands up and...
I'll move. Come on.
Camera people, tell us where you want us.
Yeah, we can make it
cozy.
Friendly.
So there's a question box.
Could someone bring the question box over?
Hopefully we've got some.
Oh, it's gone. It's there. Where's it? Michelle's got it. Right. Right.
I was going to censor them.
I'll do this. You get the... Oh, that's... And then that bit.
Thank you.
There you go. Oh, now that's not...
It's all right, Jim. We'll be about another 20 minutes. Hey, I must say, as we get set up, thank you so much for coming. This is exactly how we've envisaged these events happening. We were initially going to do this one inside because we thought the weather would be too cold, and it is a little cold, but it's not raining and it's not windy, which is awesome. And we've got another series of these to go through the year, including a local body elections one, which I think will be pretty interesting. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a crowd for that as well. So thank you very much for turning up and getting into the spirit of it. How close are we?
We're quite close.
We've got questions.
Right.
Are you all
Awesome.
comfortable? Do you want a seat, Anne?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like that, doesn't it?
Do you want to start off with a question?
I'm going to start off with a question because I was really interested in this, and I was interested in Ant Timpson's reaction. He a little while ago wrote a Facebook post railing against our first Snapchat feature film, possibly because he's mean and a bully, possibly for other reasons. And why were you so aggravated about that project? It seems a natural.
Are you one of these journalists that troll Facebook for
We're
content?
Facebook friends, Ant.
No, I kind of just came from the position that I was just curious about the weird thing about the Snapchat thing is that it was the obvious next progression of where a film's going to be made. People joked about it. Is there going to be a Twitter movie? Is there going to be a GIF movie? And then suddenly there's a Snapchat movie made, and it was kind of made by this new generation of whether they're YouTube stars, they get these sort of huge contract deals that operate in these sort of hives where they all produce content like slaves. And it was the first feature film that came out of that, and it's such a weird thing about watching this new this new creative body that is sort of intruding and taking away, I think, kind of some of the platform that people who have got, I think, a lot more talent are finding it really hard and struggling to get their visions out there. And then you just see someone who's got a huge following from showing cat videos or doing a high-pitched voice or something, and there was this crazy series made called The Chair where they pitched a independent filmmaker versus a YouTube star and followed the progression of how they gave them the same budget, they gave them the same script, and it was, a sort of, it was like the new generation versus the old generation, and let's have a look at the entire process and what came out of it. And what came out of it, from the guy who backed both things, it was like the generation that is raised, some say the entitled generation, they don't really want to pay for the content. You know, so these YouTube stars make these huge films. They've got 12 million followers. You do the calculations. It goes, they're going to get X amount of dollars back because of this huge following, but they just don't turn up. And they just his film, the big YouTube star, got, you know, just was a huge flop. The independent film didn't do much better in terms of revenue, but it had a longer life. And like, you know, the YouTube thing was not going to have any sort of legs or longevity to it. It was like a gimmick sort of thing. And so the Snapchat was like the ultimate fuck you to, I thought, the independent film scene, even though you could say that it's the natural progression of where things are going.
That is interesting. And Michelle, I wonder whether you have any thoughts on that, because there are kids who are YouTube vloggers who are signed up actually to the same agency as me, and they get a lot more work. They are seen as having commercial potential. There are a lot of adults looking at these teenagers who make video blogs, aren't there?
Yeah, I think with that Snapchat film, what's it called, Sick House, the director actually made sure that the people that she enlisted as the actors in it already had a massive following. And I think in that respect, that's a really clever commercial sensibility. And so for that, in that respect, I kind of, you know, you go, well, good luck to them. People still want long form. I do get your sentiment though. Like, I completely get that, but I also go, this isn't going away. There's that segment of, there is an audience for that. And it was an innovative way to tell a story. They sort of cut it, I think they shot bits and sort of put it out real time as if the story is happening, and they didn't tell anyone that it was a film. So all these people are like, what's going on? Is there something really happening to this person? And I'm challenged by that massively, but I'm also intrigued by it. So
I find I have an immediate knee-jerk reaction to things that I perceive as gimmicky. So I haven't seen that film and I don't know much about it, but as soon as I heard about it, I had a knee-jerk negative reaction because it just seems gimmicky. And even like Tangerine, which is a very well-received film, but was initially got a lot of attention because it was shot on an iPhone. I had the same feeling about that, because it's like, you know, if you can convince me there's a really good reason to do it, then sure, but otherwise it just seemed like a gimmick to get attention, and I found that, I don't know.
That's, apples and oranges in a way, because Tangerine was by...
well done.
And literally Apple iPhone.
And Tangerine
was amazing. Was like a filmmaker who'd already had, you know, a proven career, and you know.
It was a different outlet, but it just seemed to me that, like, you know, I didn't know if there was a.
I realise I'm like the angry old man on the lawn.
Yes, I didn't realise if there was a.
You are shouting at
compelling
clouds
reason
right now.
I've got a 14-year-old that doesn't see the gimmicks though. You know, if her YouTube Zoella or Alfie or whatever one it's called, they're called, if they put out something like that, they just don't see that. They just think, wow, this is new and innovative. They don't know a world without these kind of...
Well, they're not cynical yet, but they give them time.
But that's the point. There's an audience for them.
And shape them.
I don't think it's mutually... I think there's so many people. The need for content is so huge and so insatiable that if that takes care of that audience that doesn't really appreciate film, we'll let them go and watch that and give the...
I mean, I guess if it's great, if the content is good, then it's like, it's justified. I just think that there's... so much, you know, there's a morass of just completely mediocre crap out there, and then it's like if you give people more encouragement, more platform to make the clutter even more mediocre, that it's really hard to find the good material. And I just think it's like a dumbing down, it's idiocracy all over, and you know, I've just got this crazy belief like maybe we should be supporting, like, you know, people who have actually got talent and not idiotic YouTube stars.
She's the producer of Greasy Strangler.
Thank you. 4
This
stars by The Guardian, yes.
This is an interesting question considering the digital age. Now that Video Easy Ponsonby is closed, how do we see films that we didn't get to at the festival?
Actually, Ant, you can answer that.
I was just in my own moment then. I forgot, what was the, how do we find films that have gone...
Yeah, now that we've had Video Easy Ponsonby closed.
Oh.
How do we see them?
I mean, everyone still owes late fees at Video Ponsonby, I'm guessing. I still get those cease and desist letters of joining any other video organisation. But I think now it's obviously, you know, Netflix or whoever's the dominant player in the industry. And it's like, you know, these days it's, as, you know, programmers from the film festival, it's really a reliance on the festival playing every territory now, because that becomes the theatrical run for all these sort of films. And home video is like a disaster zone for most films. The numbers in the last 3 years, like if you just look at the actual units sold within the territories for the types of films has completely dropped. If you don't get into the warehouse, if you get maybe a JB Hi-Fi deal, you're like, oh, thank God, or whatever, but it's, anything R-rated is not going to get in the warehouse, which is the big dominant player in terms of actual home video, which is, they made a decision based on Grand Theft Auto. It was like, that's it, we're not going to promote, we're not going to display any film that's R18 rated over, which is kills a lot of films that, not just like the Greasy Strangler, but a lot of quality content that is suddenly really impossible to find on that format anymore.
Tickled is an M, by the way. It'll be at the warehouse.
Which is great to G.
It's kind of interesting because we have a format in Blu-ray that is magnificent and will do 7.1 sound if you want it, and yet we are watching films at best on SVOD services that aren't that good. I mean,
and they disappear.
Does it matter?
They just vanish off the service one day, and you don't know why.
Well, it doesn't matter for, the horrible thing is like, coming from someone who, instantly recognises wrong aspect ratio or how things are presented. It's like, it starts from the ground level. You go into like Sony stores or they're all playing films in the wrong aspect ratio. People suddenly look like sumo wrestlers. And it's like, so it goes through the entire industry. Like there's a certain discerning audience that really want the highest quality that still exists. They're the ones that buy the box sets that, of the home video. And our film Turbo Kid, we bypassed the big box stores because of the costs involved. Like you put out 45,000 units, and then if it doesn't sell well, 22,000 come back to the distributor, so they have to eat that cost. So now they make that call. It's like, let's do a special edition, higher priced, targeted towards a certain audience that are going to actually buy it and not get a hand me back.
I'm going to completely jump streams here and talk about something else that's happening with video that's particularly current.
These questions are great, by the way.
Yeah, we'll get to those as well, but I really want to get this in. Dylan had the remarkable experience of having a personal encounter about the movie broadcast live via Facebook Live. Now, in the past week, we have seen Facebook Live and Periscope videos of people being shot and arrested, and in one of them, probably someone died, and while the stream was going in close-up. I just wonder what you all think. Does this change everything? Dylan, you've been Facebooking
I watched that video. Not live, but I saw it.
Yeah, me too.
And it wasn't until afterwards I was like, oh, I just watched someone die. And then later that day I saw a live Facebook video or YouTube video it was, of bears catching salmon in a waterfall in Alaska. So, that was a nice flip to that. But I think surely it's already changing the way we view the world around us, because there are these things that are happening that are going out live. And I remember when the big protests in Missouri after whoever it was shot by a policeman there. But so many of those protests were being broadcast by dozens of people live for thousands of people around the world to watch. So it just seems like it's going to have an impact.
I've almost been feeling like there's so much content. What were you saying before, Michelle? 600 hours of YouTube content is uploaded
something like that. Is it
every
that?
hour?
600
Probably a lot more than that.
600 days an hour, I think it is.
600 days per hour.
Yeah, it's completely staggering.
Do you get the feeling that everyone is putting stuff out there and no one is actually watching it? I personally felt quite overwhelmed.
Have you ever found a YouTube video that says 0 views when you watch it?
There's a website that has them all, right?
I don't know, but once or twice
one-view videos.
I've come across one and I'm like, wow, how has no one else watched this? And how many out there never get seen by anyone ever?
Not even the person who created them.
Apparently
That's the amazing
not.
thing. Yeah,
no QC check.
Well, there's a music equivalent as well. There's a site called Notify, which is all the records on Spotify that no one has ever listened to. We're in a world where it's crowded with content now.
But people have mindfulness apps on their phone and mental health apps on their phone. And I just kind of feel like maybe don't look at your phone for a while. Do you think we're going to go backwards and stop at some point?
Nope.
I don't know, we were talking in the break, I'm certainly really craving some kind of curation site. You know, if you think about, probably all of us get sent links and Facebook, and somebody sends another link and look at this, and we're yet to find a platform really where there's a curation.
What if you took the videos that were really cool and played them like end to end, and timed them, and then printed that schedule in a book that people could buy at the super ed? No, honestly though, broadcast TV like that has something going for it, in that you know what you're watching. Someone curates it.
And there is actually quite a lot of good stuff on YouTube, but it's a pain if you use your smart TV, you're hopping around and it's recommending stupid stuff for you.
And then you watch one video of some dumb guy doing something dumb, and suddenly it's recommending 100 other guys doing dumb things. You're like, no, I just wanted to see what that one was.
Yeah.
But the strangest things get popular as well, like Damn Daniel. I didn't think it was that funny. Alan has a guest every day, it seems, from a meme or a viral video, and a lot of them aren't that great, but people are watching them, obviously. I don't know if that's a question. I just wanted to say
I'm so happy I don't
that.
understand what you just said.
Yeah, does anyone... Can you yell out if you've seen that? That they were on Ellen? It was a Snapchat story. It wasn't that funny. I know you've seen it. I know a couple of people have seen it.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't as huge as I'm thinking.
So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of interesting because there are things that people see that mean nothing to the rest of us. I guess the question here is, how do you get noticed?
No
idea. I think there's a huge, I know for brands particularly, there's a massive swell in influencer marketing. People are desperate to cling on and leverage from somebody else's following that they've probably taken ages to make by posting cat videos, who knows. Yeah. But like that Snapchat video, you know, the reason that was successful is they leveraged from somebody else's audience, and that's what we're going to see more and more from, and brands are constantly trying to find ways to connect with influencers for that reason.
There's a weird kickback because Warner Brothers in the States just got their asses handed to them by the Federal Trade Commission because they paid PewDiePie and some other people to post positive reviews of their game and didn't disclose it properly.
Whoops.
So that's sort of, you know, and people don't like being marketed to.
Yeah,
or don't like not realizing they're being marketed to.
Yeah, it's getting...
I mean, yeah, does it even matter though? Do people,
No.
does it, the consumers even care anymore? I mean, it happens with, you know, you just see it constantly with bloggers here who are doing these obvious posts for products, but there's no disclosure or anything, but it's like, you know, the people they're sending it to, you know, they're passive, they're either going to switch off, pull back, or, you know, I just think it doesn't matter if it's disclosed or not, it's just like, you know.
Yeah, or do audiences now just expect that that's going to happen, expect that anyone who posts any content will have some sort of agenda?
I think the younger generation is really comfortable with product placement. To your point, they don't want to pay to go to pay to do things or watch
things.
They
want to pay for
so they're
anything.
really happy for product placement, and they're quite fine with it being blatant, which is surprising. I thought it would be the opposite way, but they seem really fine with it. It's like, yeah, well, that's how it's paid for.
Don't want to pay for things, don't want to watch ads, so that's what
no.
you're left
So I'd
with.
rather see Coke bottles in the back of shirt.
Shall we do a quick fire through the audience questions?
Let's do a quick fire through the audience questions.
Okay, not a question, a statement. In 1994, I watched The Creeping Terror by Edward, at Incredibly Strange Film Festival when I was 14. It changed my life.
Thanks, Esther.
Round of applause for Ant Timpson.
Woo! That wasn't me, that was...
Changed someone's life.
Edward had nothing to do with that film, sorry.
Yeah.
Just to correct that nerd
Don't be
out in
such
the
a
audience.
nerd.
A film festival query. I can go to 10 films at the festival. Good on you for getting a 10 trip pass. This year, which 10 should I go to? Or which ones, shall we say?
Well, luckily there's like, I think maybe 9 or 10 in my section, so...
All of the incredibly strange
that's
films.
That's probably the easiest bit, yeah.
Are you two looking forward to anything in particular?
I have 3 children.
I'm finishing a film.
You're what, sorry?
I'm finishing a film. I'm actually in Wellington, like, non-stop now, which is great, but I
Do
don't really get to
filmmakers
see a lot.
have time to watch films usually?
I'm like one of those ones that watches them, like you say, with poor quality and poor speakers on my laptop before I go to bed.
Yep.
So, you know, I frustrate myself in that respect.
I want to see Gimme Danger, the Stooges film, which is on... What night's it on? Yeah. Wednesday and the Sunday, yeah. That's the one I really want to see, and I'll probably see some others.
I'm quite looking forward to seeing Poirier.
Yeah,
me too.
Sorry about Dalvania's Prime.
I'm really
yeah,
looking
I
forward
have to
to
be
Poirier.
out of town. I have tickets to the film festival opening gala of Poirier, and I have to be out of town that night, so my family are going. But I think the film will be great. I think it's, yeah, I've met the director, and I think he's a smart guy. So.
Awesome. Michelle, this is an interesting one. Have you experienced any resistance or scepticism from the film or creative industries, seeing as you're more closely aligned with business?
Not as yet. No, not really. I don't know. I see them as really different things. I think they bring. I think the business aspect brings really interesting opportunities into filmmaking. You know, we couldn't have made Chasing Great if we didn't have a business that could have paid for the production for 9 months. So I think that's just a reality in New Zealand. There's not tons of money, and so if that's how you can make things, well, I think that's really good.
It's also, the industry's so small that probably lots of people end up bouncing between all sorts of, a lot of people who direct documentaries and films are also doing commercials and corporate
absolutely.
videos, so there's probably not much room for that.
This one just says, is it true David Farrier is a megalomaniac?
Yes.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Home of 24-hour movie marathon. Do you know what's happening with the Heritage Avondale Movie Theatre?
Yes, I know it's going through renovations at the moment to get new projection gear and to tile and fix the toilets
yes.
that haven't been changed for many decades.
Important.
So, yeah, once that's been completed, then it's open for fun and games. Yeah.
Great.
Are you not going to ask that audience question about Michelle's hair?
Well, I thought...
I thought that was fair. Well, it's a praiseworthy
I'm
question.
sure she's got more interesting things to talk about than her hairstyle, though.
Thanks, Leon.
Where do you get your hair done? It does look beautiful, Michelle.
That's very
Stunning.
kind. I actually have 4 kids, so I don't often blow dry it. So it was a special night. So I got the blow dryer out.
We really appreciate that.
Yeah, rub it in.
Back to the future of the moving image. How do you think technology and consumption trends are influencing formats? I mean, I'm struck by why are films still 90 minutes long and shorts being this inferior thing that's 10 minutes long, when if you look at what's happening online, you look at something like what Vice News are doing, they make documentaries that of lengths that fit the subject. They might be 10 minutes, they might be 75 minutes. Why has that not happened in other forms of moving image?
If you look at documentary, it's going that way, though. You look at The Jinx was, six parts, and Making a Murderer, and the OJ one that's coming out. Like, people are comfortable with now, because there are ways to distribute episodic, long-form content in that way. That's happening. And then I think, I don't know about, there's also lots of outlets for things that are shorter, but it comes back to the how do you get noticed thing, right? Like if you want to make a film that can go through the distribution path that films do, it has to conform to what people want a film to be, I think.
It's a natural duration for things, I think, as well. You look at who's your audience, what's the story, and eventually you sort of shake it out and it feels like the right space.
Yeah, well, I mean, advertising drove the running times. I mean, because you had feature films that had to be a certain length. So when it got transferred to broadcast TV, it was the minimum running time, so you couldn't sell a film that was under 75 minutes to certain territories. So now, I mean, the great thing about Netflix.
Netflix does not work in Netscape.
Is that it has changed that landscape completely. And so you've got Louis C.K. who's like, why do we have to stick to this traditional format of, episodic TV? So it's like this episode it feels like it needs to be this long. I'm going to create it that long. This one can be shorter. And so that's that basically because they're one-off sales for worldwide distribution. You don't have to meet the demands of territories. So it's not driven by those territories anymore. It's driven by behemoths like, Viacom, Netflix. So it's kind of interesting, in terms of like content creators, like we do have options now if we can do those direct sales straight to those companies.
Shorter films cost the same to see as long films.
You mean so? Well, the interesting point about that is like why are these mega blockbusters always like 2 hours 20 minutes? Like Captain America throwing his shield around. It's like why does it have to be 2 hours 20? It's like because there's so much money spent on these things, 300-400 million all up with marketing. It's like they feel like they have to give bang for the buck because financially you'd obviously want them to be smaller because then you have more sessions in the theatres and make more revenue. But it's a thing that I think hopefully is going to be changing because my belief is that everything feels too long. Everything. It feels too long. Not that it needs to be Vine level or reducing down to like idiotic levels. But in terms of like, you know, these bloated feature films, I'm hoping will alter and change as things go on.
Well, I wonder if it's a bit like at the height of the compact disc, where every bloody album had to be 70 minutes long because that was how long a compact disc could accommodate. And now you're seeing perfectly good albums that are 45 minutes long, and it's nice, you know.
And technology is making things snippet-based as well. Twitter's 140 characters, Snapchat is a limit on the time. So it's obviously, our attention spans are shorter, aren't they?
What was that?
Our attention span.
Just a question for Michelle about how it's looking in commercial land, because I gather that advertising agencies got very excited about video because, and certainly publishers did, because you could make more money off the advertising on them. But I wonder how many people are watching them. That's the...
Yeah, that is certainly a challenge. There's this sort of sense that brands need to be always on, all the time, on every platform, publishing something. And it's a real challenge for anybody working in that space. Well, where can we add value? And YouTube come out with things, Hero Hub Hygiene and whatever, but really it comes down to, is there value in the content? Is it entertaining? Does it give me something that will enhance my life in a how-to? Is it something that will last for a long time? And I'm personally really against just making things to fill the space. You know, so we always ask ourselves, where's value? But they say content is king, and that, you know, it's been bandied around a little bit more lately, which is distribution is King Kong. Who's seeing it? There's no point making stuff if nobody's going to see it and it doesn't have value. So again, that comes back to influencer marketing. It's interesting space. There's certainly a lot of stuff out there, and we certainly encourage brands to think about where is the value, deliver value.
I was going to say, when I used to work in television post-production, we used to have advertising agencies come in, and they'd be making a 30-second commercial and a 15-second commercial, and a viral was what they would say. And it was amazing how disconnected they were that they thought they could make a viral. Yeah. That was one of the deliverables out of the end of our edit suite.
It's certainly fascinating to see where it's going to go. Video as the king, monopolising our attention. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, you three.
Thanks
on
for
the
having
panel.
Thank you.
And a big thank you for Esther, who's off on an adventure.
Thanks, Russell. I just wanted to say a big thank you to you, to you for kind of mentoring me and asking me to help you with this. It's been so much fun, and thanks to you guys for coming along tonight.